Is my audio good?
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds great. Hey everyone, we're live. We are here with Swix, also known as Shawn Wang, and Shawn's
Okay.
coming to us live from. Shawn, are you revealing where you are currently, or is
Yeah.
the bunker private?
No. I've been live
It's
streaming
public.
in the
Okay.
middle.
Okay.
I've been live streaming at night, and then the sun came up while I live stream, and then everyone was like, "You're not in the US."
So Shawn's coming to us live from Singapore, and the so Shawn, you wrote what I thought was one of the most insightful pieces on kind of how to think about being a developer in the upcoming kind of economic turmoil. So we'd love for you to give maybe a quick introduction to yourself, and then kind of where you think we are in the where you think we are economically, and then kind of maybe in the tech sector specifically.
Cool. Well, first, thanks for having me. I obviously owe a lot to the two of you for creating Full Stack, and then I went through it in 2017. I came to Full Stack from a finance career. I basically spent about 6 to 7 years doing everything from central banking to investment banking to hedge funds, and then burning out, and then realizing that I wanted to code for a living. So then I went to Full Stack. After Full Stack, I got hired straight out of hiring day at Full Stack, which is great because I never had to job search. I actually did job search, but essentially I took the job, the first job that with the first person I sat down with at hiring day. That was it. I could have just like
Amazing.
It's amazing. What was your first job out of Full Stack? It wasn't the one that you just. It wasn't with Netlify, was it? Or
it was 2 Sigma.
okay.
A pretty decent employer.
Yeah.
And, I only joined them for 6 months, but it was it was a pretty good employer brand to have on. And it gave me some exposure to like app level architecture and just like working with other really smart devs who were experts in their field, and I think it helped me bridge that gap from finance to tech really well, because since then I'm just all tech. And then basically started so I graduated in Full Stack in November 2017. Started my first dev job with 2 Sigma in 2018. And the unfortunate thing about 2 Sigma was that I was in basically a corporate venture where we just did not have a lot to do for reasons. And essentially I just got really bored. So I just started being active in the New York meetup scene. So I started doing talks, started doing blog posts, and did that for 6 months. And Netlify noticed what I was doing and offered me a job through my Twitter DMs. Since then, that's essentially been my entire job career is just people reaching out to me.
So you never had to interview at Netlify either. Your interview was your blog, kind of.
But like, you have a good leg up when the founder reaches out to you and offers you like, hey, you should interview with us, right? So
yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we always tell students that like your building your online technical brand is, can be immensely helpful in your job search, and I feel like you're kind of the living proof of that.
So I don't know about the technical brand. Like I always like people think anyway, I'm not that good of a coder, right? But I can market myself. And people want that for certain roles, and I was very qualified for that role, so they took me for that. What I would say to that is, I would
say that you're being humble too, because I think you are.
That's right.
You are. I wouldn't say you're not a good coder. I would say you're very multi-talented, which is something that we've known. So good coding and good marketing.
That's what full stack developers are in some ways.
Exactly.
Can be across technical and design and writing.
Well, we didn't need a term because I feel like stack is so much up and down, right? What is it? What is the I guess in the Valve they have that great term, the T-shaped developer, right? Good at one thing, but we need something else, like a full heap developer or full full breadth developer, or full graph developer, something that represents like being a little like mid-level depth in two things. I think is much more powerful than being or can be as powerful as being really good at one thing.
I mean, so like, you know, we before this conversation started, we talked about the OSI model, which is something I learned from, you know, interview prep at Full Stack. And I was like, okay, OSI model, you know, helps to model protocols and how machines talk to each other. But how do you model like humans in tech working with each other? And really the insight of working on the OSI model for software careers is that nobody's full stack, right? Like you can call yourself full stack, but essentially you work across back end and front end, and you still need to know operating systems. You still need to know cloud and I forget the fifth layer that I put in there, but essentially like there's nobody's full stack, and we all rely on some layer of abstraction somewhere to do our jobs. So I don't know. I don't love the term. I don't love T-shaped, but that's what's in vogue right now.
No, I'm really excited to talk about the because I think the OSI model. When I saw this post, it was one of those things where you're like, that's so brilliant, and at the same time, to map the analog between the OSI layer and coding careers and where people are sitting across that stack. And you know, I think it is true. Full stack is the stack is so deep, right? Because at the bottom layer, you're probably like, you know, I studied electrical engineering, and it's like the bottom layer, you're dealing with like physics, and even double E sits on top of physics. And there's like stuff that's happening at the, you know, silicon level that I, you know, have no idea what's going on. And how deep do you actually go, right? I think we'll say most people go about as deep as runtime, probably, in our world, right? Web development world.
Right.
So Shawn, I'd love to kind of start with this post you put out, the coronavirus recession. Kind of, what do you think we are? I mean, you wrote this when almost I would say almost like you were one of the early people who called that this is going to be bigger than we thought. And what do you think we are now? We're in mid-April right now. People are still sheltering in place. You're in Singapore. We're based in America, New York. Where are we? What are you thinking in both the? What are you thinking? You know, about your predictions, and what do you think we go from here?
So I've basically retired from like the business of making predictions, because that was it was very stressful in my finance career, and it was more like I tried to frame myself more as observing real time more intensely than other people, like observing the present more intensely than other people, and just being hyper aware, because a lot of people like aren't really awake to changes in the like fundamental shifts in their reality. And they just always assume that things will be as they have been, and when things change like this really quickly, they're not really prepared for it. I also want to like be upfront that I don't think I got like I knew that there was a very high chance that there would be the huge stock market drawdown. I obviously knew there was going to be a recession. I didn't think that, like right now, I'm thinking roughly around 20 to 30% of the US being unemployed, right? That is depression level. And that we're not like, that wasn't what I was thinking on March 7th. That's when I posted.
Do you think this is worse than you were thinking that would happen?
Yeah.
Because you're right. I just saw a stat that 25% was the peak in Great Depression, and we're now, even this morning, it was about 16%, right? Approaching 20%.
Yeah, we're not even there yet.
Yeah.
But it'll happen. The thing is, like, we always learn from the previous lessons, right? Like every single person in economics knows exactly the lessons we should have taken away from the Great Depression 100 years ago. So we're not just not going to repeat it, because like we know how we would have played this, and if this plays out exactly like that, like the $2 trillion stimulus, like I was like, yeah, this is going to happen. A whole bunch of pork is going to be thrown from Congress, and we're just going to eat it up, right? Like we're not going to elect Andrew Yang, but we're going to basically just enact his policies.
No, I think UBI is like all of a sudden UBI is seems like we're pretty close to that, right? Initial checks and then now permanent checks.
I'm not a huge like. Look, there's strong arguments for and against, and like I don't know the reality of it, but like it just like sentiment just swung within. Like he dropped out of race in like Feb. And then like 2 months later, he's like, yeah, yep, everything I campaigned for is coming true. So I don't think. Anyway, like the bottom line is there's going to be a lot of unemployment, but there was never going to be a situation where the government was going to let like the airlines go out of business. The other thing that was concerning me that I mean, just like pales in comparison. I was like, okay, it's this combination of travel shutdown, all leisure shutdown, and to me that was going to be it. And I actually thought that like the tech sector would be relatively insulated because a lot of us can work remote. That was not true because revenue disappears and then everyone just cascades. Like it's like a ripple out effect. Like if you're a tech firm, fine, but if you serve a company that suddenly is out of business, then your revenues are affected and then your employees are affected and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
That's like Netlify was hiring at like a 30% growth rate, meaning like we had 100 employees, we had 30 openings. And when I left, I was like, dude, like freeze hiring. And I don't think that advice was taken to heart because like this like people find it hard to change. Like they find it hard to pivot because like they like put down a whole bunch of effort making plans. Like we had a board meeting, right? And we like promised the board of directors like we're gonna do all these things with all these people. To go from that to like nope, and then like maybe have to lay off people is a very, very difficult thing for some people to encounter. Like for me, like maybe I just have less. I don't know. Like I've been through a lot of life change, and I just have less qualms about like understanding that situation has changed and I need to change with it. So,
and you were in 2008. You were in the finance industry, so you probably saw firsthand what happened there. Is that correct?
Well, I was in college then. I graduated. Okay. I graduated in 2010.
Okay.
Which was also like it wasn't great. We were
just kind of the start of the.
Yeah. So no, I mean, so I think where we are is that the unemployment unemployment issue is really you know. Going to get worse, but like we are also past the peak of like we're past the worst surprise. Like the world is now extremely prepared for the worst case scenario, and all we're doing is fighting about how to implement like measures to like bend the curve. There's a great Twitter account that I follow, run by Michael Nielsen from Y Combinator. It's called COVID-19 SitRep, which gives you the curves for every state. And you can see the curves bending. And obviously New York is the worst affected, but they're all bending. And it's really good news. So I mean, like it's gonna be leaky, but like we're through like the worst shock. And it's always the first shock that like the stock market and the economy and everything else responds to the most. And then it recovers really quickly. So I mean, I think it's gonna suck for a long time. I put out a poll. I put out a poll for expectations with regards to like when do you think we'll have in-person mass events again, like conferences? When do they come back?
I saw that. Yeah.
Not saying like conferences are obviously not like the center of the world, but it's just like one measure of like when do we feel comfortable being in a room with other people again? And people are the 50% of people said first half of 2021, which means the rest of this year. It's basically we're like what we are doing right now, which is just
virtual events and
social distancing and everything. So to me, like it's a very interesting acceleration of all the trends that have been happening. It's very worrying for the real economy because now like the people who serve the internet hold more power than people who serve the real world. So like my dad just got laid off today. And it was a long time coming, so it's not a surprise. He does aircraft servicing, right? Like which is important. Like he makes sure that aircrafts don't crash. Like
fall out of the sky, yeah.
Yeah. And like what aircrafts not even taking off, so of course he's not needed. And like I don't know, like just like people who are like essential workers, essential services. You really like realize how important they are, but then also like the people who are on like they're doing worse. Like people in hospitals are getting laid off just because they don't have the right finances in order. Whereas like people on the internet are doing better than ever.
Yeah.
which is kind of perverse, but like it's kind of happening. So like for me, like I'm very non-judgmental when these things happen. Like the reality is reality, and we have to position ourselves the best that we can. And I think as software engineers, obviously we're positioned very well.
Yeah, I think one thing that strikes me about the first like 2008 was that I felt like, you know, being in tech then, it didn't really feel that close to home, right? There were some opportunities created. Some sectors got hit. Nothing like 2001. 2001, I think, was tech was the bearer of that brunt. This one, I think it'll still be seen, right? I think we're now looking at advertising spending and how that's going to trickle through kind of small ad tech, large ad tech companies. Interesting to see, and I think you know, I'll post a link in the description to your article. I really thought you had some great points in there about. So Shawn, you know, the first thing that I think you, you know, of course you have a long career, but I remember the first thing I read about you kind of in your post full stack world was your I think it started as a tweet thread and then an article on learning in public.
Oh,
so I really like this idea of or you know, maybe I'll let it come straight from the founder's mouth. What is it? What is learning in public, and why do you think it is so powerful?
Okay, so learning in public is this idea that you grow faster when you learn it in public, and the default for most people is that we learn in private, and then we kind of stick things in our head. And that's fine, and that's how most people do it. But the thesis, and which I have lived, is that once you put it out there, you not only remember it faster, but then you also get other people involved in your journey. You help others, but then also people who know more than you can correct you. And that's just a fundamentally faster way to learn, because once you've gotten something publicly wrong, you'll never forget it. And people are very incentivized to follow along in your journey, because you're growing with them. They're investing in you, and then you're amplifying their voice. So I find the one of the weirdest things is that it's useful to serve as a foil for people who know more than you, because you as a recent beginner can speak to other beginners. You have a beginner's mind, and that's the one thing they don't have. And so like I've had Dan Abramov on the React team. Like I knew about hooks 3 months before release because he was testing the docs on me. Because I learned it in public, because I had a proven way. Like I had proven that I was responsible, first of all, but then second of all, like that I had the. Like if it wasn't going to make it for beginners, then I wouldn't really understand it. So that was one of the instances where like it was just very clear to me after doing it for about 6 months. Like post full stack, I started doing those talks and those blog posts. I think I put this out I was basically like thinking about basically going back to. I never did it, but I was thinking about going back to full stack and doing like a alumni speech, right? Mm-hmm. So I was writing it down, and that became the Learn in Public essay, and I posted it out. It was an image. It was just like a tweet image, and people loved it, and it really resonated with people.
You know, one thing I like to think about is what is the mechanic that makes something work, right? So I think definitely looking at at least if the extraction of anecdote into, I mean, looking at your career, it's taken off because I think of your ability to share. So two things. One is like, what do you think the underlying mechanic is? Do you think it is, for example, one thing I think that writing forces you to is it forces you to serialize like kind of things in your brain that are not very clearly defined into at least a concretized form, right? And that oftentimes becomes a cornerstone that is much stronger than just an idea that's floating in your brain. So do you think that mechanic itself is powerful? Or do you think the mechanic you mentioned, more the group feedback, is what makes it work? What do you think is the thing that makes it work?
Everything. Like there's just a bunch of factors that just all come together to like make it work. I actually gave a talk on this. I just put it in our private chat, which is like my thesis for why learning public works, and it's kind of all those things, all of the above. So like what you just mentioned, which is like when you try to like it's a cognate of what people say, like if you want to really know something, you teach it, right? And if you can't really explain it in simple terms, then you haven't really understood it. Which is kind of like the Einstein, Richard Feynman way of explaining things. So so that's true. But then also there's just this effect which I've been really enamored with recently, which is like this idea of a second brain, which is that even if not a single soul ever reads your work, no followers, no feedback, nothing, just like the effect of noting things down means that you no longer have to rely on your head, your memory to store it. So you can have an external storage space that you can search and organize. And it's just like an organized mind will beat an unorganized mind, all the time, like 10 out of 10 times. It just makes so much sense that you want to organize it and put it down on paper somewhere. And then obviously, like the next step is you expose it to the public, and it gets picked up by Google, so you can use Google as your own search tool. Like a lot of the times when you run into problems and you type in the answer, and like that feeling that when you type a problem into Google and the first answer that comes up is yours, it's because
it's freaky, right? It happens to me sometimes with like a Reddit post. I'm like, oh, this is my Reddit post.
But it's also because like the terms that you use are also the terms that you're going to type in to search. So, I mean, obviously that's gonna work out. But like, I think so. I actually kind of call this like big L. Like I developed a whole notation for this. Like how algorithms have big O.
Yeah.
Like, so like someone who only learns one thing and does nothing else for the rest of his life has a big L of 1, right? Constant L, right? You will learn one thing and then that's all you're about for the rest of your life. That's not realistic. Most people have a big L of log n, which n is number of years, right? And they're trying to learn stuff every year, but they keep forgetting. But if they actually have perfect memory and they keep learning, then you have a big L of n, right? L of n, which is every single year you learn something new and you keep it, which is great. And then so the question is like, how do you like do better than that? And I think there are two ways. One is still learning in private, but you're basically introspecting and you're learning abstract models from the stuff that you've already learned. So something like an L of n squared means you're learning faster the more you learn, because you're really synthesizing everything that you've had so far, and you're predicting them or like just like you're just learning faster the more that you learn, because you've seen so much that you can start synthesizing general abstract models of programming that apply regardless of framework. And then the other way, which is it's learning in public, where instead of having an n factor, which is number of years, you add a p factor, which is number of people learning alongside you, and that scales a lot, right? Like someone who learns L and P is going to learn faster than L of n, and then that's just an interesting model. Like I don't know, like obviously there's some bullshit here with regards to like this is not scientific, but I think
I always say, like, cognitive neuroscientists, please ignore my learning theories. Like it's just but again, like you're saying, it's mental models that we have of learning, and whether or not they're applicable or whether or not they're backed by research. It's well, let me ask you two things. Two things I'd love to get your thoughts on. One is when you talk about second brain, I've been seeing that term come up a lot in the VC world around, I guess, really around the heat around Notion.so. There's a new one called Rome or something, Rome Memory. Is this going to become a Notion.so podcast in the next 2 minutes? Is that your thing, or what do you use as a second brain?
OneNote. It's free.
OneNote. Okay. Yeah, that's what I've been using too. I've been
not about tools. It's just the idea that your human brain sucks for like storage and search. So offload that to machines. Offload what machines do better to machines, and then the human brain reserve that for thinking, abstractions, creativity, the stuff that humans are good at.
One thing I know you might not know about this at all, but I've been thinking about like second brains as memory versus second brains as thinking, right? And I think the closest I've seen to this is Ray Dalio talks about at Bridgewater, they algorithmically encode their thinking, and they can run it against data, right? It's like, so what we do is we encode the data and then we think about it. He's saying like, look, you can do both and use computers to help you think. I'm curious if you've seen that or been able to do that, or what do you think? Does that resonate with you at all? Or do you think that's kind of, because like OneNote to me, like this is memory encoding, right? Not, it's like memorization of our brain, but can we offload thinking to it in a more systematic way?
Maybe. The most charitable way I would characterize, I mean, we did quantitative trading at my fund as well. Part of the reason I learned Python was to implement the models that Alquant helped us construct. It's very limited. It's just like any like, would you call a spreadsheet thinking? Because that's essentially what it is.
Well, I got a sense from reading his stuff that this is deeper than just like financial back testing, right? Because I think like that's the first thing that comes to mind. Is like, look, you're just back testing ideas and making sure that is your thinking sound through through history. This is more like, for example, one thing is that this is controversial, but like, who do you trust in the organization based off their historical decisions? And that's something that I find fascinating, of like kind of the page rank of this decision authority inside an organization. I think
that's valid. Like, okay, Bridgewater is famous for that. I think that's valid because it formalizes something that we apply selectively, and obviously we all have decision bias, like cognitive biases when we do stuff like that. So obviously it's good to actually make rules out of that, so you're not subject to cognitive bias. I think that's all it is. I don't know. I don't do that. I think like for all his blathering about like we have automated every damn thing in Bridgewater, his book is still called Principles. These are the rules for my human brain to execute when making decisions, and these are just like, I have learned this over time, and I do not intend to repeat those mistakes. So I formalize it as principles, and that's it. I don't see him coding up the principles.
Yeah. And I think one thing I think a lot. Go ahead, Nimit.
So one concept I really liked of yours that you talked about in the learning in public is pick up what they put down, and it's a way to get mentors in the community who are teaching you and who you're helping out. And I'm curious, like, how I think a lot of people struggle with how do you find a mentor, because it seems like, quote unquote important people, they never have time, and you always feel like you're afraid of bothering them. So what's your approach to like finding those mentors, getting them interested in you when you may be going through that imposter syndrome, and like how have you seen that work for you?
Yeah, so the solution of finding mentors is to not try. I think a mentor, like a mentorship, like I get people asking me to be their mentors, and it's a job that is unpaid, that is open-ended, that is very vague. Like it's just like not an attractive proposition for the mentor, which is why like I can buy my own cup of coffee, thank you very much. It's more the so I think the better way to do this is like a mutual exchange of value. Everyone who is an expert in something is also super busy, and that's an advantage. Like if you view that as a weakness, you're just looking at it wrong. Like if like there's something that they recently put out, they want feedback on it, and nobody gives feedback because we're all busy with our own stuff. So if you're the one giving feedback, they almost have to respond to you. They don't have a choice, because like that's what
especially if it's insightful feedback that you like.
So like if they put out a demo, try the demo. If they put out a library, try the library, report issues in docs, and then just like build a relationship as someone who like picks up on stuff and like carries it through, and then they entrust you with more stuff, and then more stuff, and then they're mentoring you. They just never signed up for it, but you're proving that you're worth mentoring along the way. And I think it fixes the number one problem, like the cold start problem with getting started learning in public, which is that you have no followers, and people thrive on feedback. Like I get it, right? Like I need feedback too. And so the one way to get feedback is like getting feedback from random people doesn't matter. Like some trolls, some like haters, like screw them. Like you want feedback from the people that you respect and who are actively involved in the stuff that you want to learn. And so like the one guaranteed way to do it is to just pick up on the stuff that they want done. It's kind of like free spec work a little bit, but they're teaching you a lot of value. I mean, and it's, I think
the spec work debate, I feel like that's true later in your career, but early in your career, you are doing a lot of things on spec, right? Because you have to demonstrate value, and no one's gonna kind of pay. No one's gonna pay to see whether or not you have value or not, right? So I'd say for someone, I kind of lament people in their deep in their career talking like spec work is BS to people early in their career, because I feel like that's kind of a negative mentality.
But I mean,
I love to.
We all draw our own lines. So I
actually, the thing I knew you for before you were famous for learning in public was your podcast, Imposter Syndrome, and this is again a topic, and I feel like, looking at someone like yourself now, people, I think a lot of our students look at, I heard about Shawn Wang, and I heard that he's an alumni at Full Stack. How can I be like him, right? And so, and they feel like it's such a long road from where they are to where you are. How do you recommend, or what are your thoughts around imposter syndrome? What are your mental models around whether, like, what is real about imposter syndrome? How do you get over it? How do you think about that?
So I was just writing this in my drafts, because I have a chapter on imposter syndrome. Just give me 1 second. I just want to pull it up, because I have dealing with imposter syndrome, and then I have
okay.
First of all, like I just thought so when I recorded the podcast, I never finished it because I hate podcast editing. I hate it.
Yeah.
So like I could interview people all day, but I don't want to edit it.
Editing is like painful, right? Like there's no visual marker to align to. You're like, oh, gotta find another waveform.
Yeah, no, I can see the waveform for my double clicks. So when I do my video editing, that's what I do. But anyway, so obviously it's a concern for a lot of people. And look, like I'm still facing imposter syndrome today. I'm writing a book on career advice when like I don't know jack shit. And it's really kind of coming to terms with how you know what you know. And being extremely confident in that, but then also not attaching your self-worth in your work. So I always say that you can learn so much on the internet for the low price of your ego, right? If you have a small ego, this is another PG.
That's great,
right? Like PG, I think has an essay called small ego, or keep your ego small. And
keep your identity small,
yeah, right, exactly. Keep your identity small. Which is like, don't identify with your work. Like that was past you. The moment you put it out, that was past you. And you are now trying to be better than that past person. And anyone who hates that work, anyone who criticizes it, is trying to help you be better than that. And that's very freeing the moment you realize that, like, that like that's all you gotta, like, everyone started somewhere and you gotta put one foot in front of the other. And that's great. The other thing is also, so one of the other ways to combat imposter syndrome is to just do the work and then be extremely clear where the work comes from. So Wikipedia has no credibility by itself, right? But it cites every single source of all the assertions, and there's a very strong like citation needed culture. Which means that Wikipedia doesn't need credibility; it just needs to collate credibility. And likewise, like if you're like going out in public and talking about something, if you have a good source for your information, then no one can argue with you because they're just arguing with the source. Then they can take it up with that person, right? But also, like if you're talking about code and the code works, that's just like incontrovertible truth that just cannot be debated with. Like the only thing you can talk about is like maybe you can make it a bit more optimal. Fine, who gives a shit? So so like once you displayed your work, right? Like you're like, I did a whole bunch of work. I don't know everything, but here's what I do know. Nobody can attack you for not knowing things. There's one aspect of our industry, right? The great thing about having no certification is that nobody expects you to know everything, and you cannot be blamed for not knowing anything. Like look at Dan Abramov's post about things I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know?
I don't know that one you're talking about.
He was like, yeah, I don't know Docker. I don't know like basic like DOM stuff. Like there's just like a bunch of stuff that he doesn't know, and he laid it out because he was like, I have specialized in this one thing, which is React, and everything else, can go away because like that's not relevant to my job, and no one can fight that. No one can say like, hey, you should know my thing even though you don't use it, because why should I? And the web is so massive that this is true for everything. It's great. So you can be ignorant about everything, and it's fantastic. But like obviously you should do the work on the thing that you're trying to work on. Like I got criticized the other day for like I was like promoting learning in public, and then they were like, oh, I feel like learning in public promotes a lot of overnight experts, like people who like read a bunch of basic shit and then they like put up a blog post and then they tout themselves as experts. I don't condone that either. Like you should do the work and then you should show the work. And if you just started learning it, then just say you just started learning it. It's no big deal.
You had a really cool word in some of your posts. I can't find it now, where you were describing like at the top of the post, like where I'm coming from. I can't find it.
Epistemic origin. I took that from
epistemic origin. Okay.
Yeah, I can.
Did you take that down or
epistemic? No, it's still up there.
Okay.
I just like I have to build my own CMS so that this becomes a thing. Anyway, I took this from Devin Zugo, who is now the product manager for open source at GitHub, which is a ridiculous job.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like a lot of pressure on that job.
So it's funny because I texted her after she got the job, and I was like, how do you get this? This job did not exist. How do you get the job? And she was like, yeah, I knew Nat Friedman, and like I was just like, hey Nat, you should have someone PM open source, and I should do it. And Nat was just like, yeah, sure. She like created her own job based on that. It's just ridiculous.
So Shawn, like one thing I hear from the people who are, I mean, I think that the idea of learning public is you're putting a lot of your journey out there, right? And like it's for others to comment, and I think everything you say about it is great. I hear from a lot of people that where do you get the time to do all that? How do you? I'm curious, like how you think about your daily schedule. Are you just like working 200 hours? I don't even know if there are 200 hours in the week. Gotta do the math. But are you just working like crazy all the time? I know right now it's like 4:30 a.m. in Singapore. Were you already up? Like, what is your? Yeah,
I try to keep American hours. I try to keep American hours, just because like my network's here and my future job is going to be there. In terms of daily routine, so a lot of people cannot do what I do because I don't have dependents, right? Like a lot of their people with families and other responsibilities and stuff just can't do at the same pace. But it doesn't mean that the idea doesn't work. It just means that like you shouldn't be as intense as me. I basically don't have other hobbies. Like I watch movies and stuff and games, but I basically don't have other hobbies. I don't have like a lot.
What games do you play? I'm always looking for recommendations. Like,
oh, I mean, like I'm really basic, man. Like I call myself a basic bro. So I was just recently playing Spider-Man PS4. I go on the Switch and I play a lot of co-op games with my sister now because I love co-op games. Co-op games like bring back the social part of gaming, and you can get mad at someone that you love. You can just yell at each other. It's fun. Are you
playing Animal Crossing? I feel like that's something I'm seeing happen that I'm like a social event happening that I'm not part of.
Yeah, I'm not part of it too. Like I don't get this whole like fake language talk. But Overcooked 2, play Overcooked 2 with a family member, because like when they screw up, you just yell at them. It's great.
Yeah, that's like my daily prep for dinner. It's like already Overcooked 2. I don't need to.
Right. Anyway, so yeah, daily routines. Like do what you can. The whole assertion is that like whatever you're learning in private anyway, you can open up part of that. And I'm not saying I'm not saying go 100% open. Like, in fact, I think like I do more learning in private than I do public, right? Like, I think it's the whole idea is like 0% public, and then maybe do 5% public, and see how that works out for you. And like,
Oh,
I think it works really well.
Shawn, one thing you wrote in your manager's README, which I really like. I mean, if people go to Swix.io and click on about and README, I really like what you wrote. It's like, how to view working with me and my strengths and weaknesses. And one thing you wrote there was systems versus goals, which is something I've talked about several times. You what?
I took that from you.
Oh, you took it from me. Okay. And I took it from, I can't remember who took it from, either Naval or Scott Adams. And I'm curious what that means to you. Like, what are the things that are in your system?
So Learn in Public is a system, right? Like there's no end date. It's just a beast that I keep feeding, and it feeds me back. And it's such a mutually dependent thing that is really great. So I mean, that's like the core thing. Let me trying to think about others. Like I have again, like I've been putting down so much for this book that I just stop and thinking about that. So yeah, kind of like the corollary for learning in public is to journal in private. Like, there's a lot of stuff that should never make it out to public, but you should still keep up a private journal. And I think that's a really good like system for picking up all the other stuff that falls through the cracks. Like you need some process of continuous self-reflection to understand where you are and where you want to be, and to adjust along the way. What other systems are there? Good enough is better than best, right? Like everyone wants the best X or the best framework. I don't care. Like, find something that's good enough, and then do the next thing. Like, don't keep looking for the best, because that really that's a positional thing, and that's zero sum. Whereas good enough is positive sum. First principles thinking is also another form of system where, like, anytime you encounter something, you start by comparing with what already exists, but then you start asking what has to exist, and you cut out a lot of cruft in between. What another form, like, and sorry, I have a whole bunch of systems that I've written down. So no,
this is fascinating. Yeah, I think
there's no particular order. Another one that I got from Patrick McKinsey I like a lot, which is don't go home with nothing. Which is like so in my finance career, right? Like, I wrote some of the best work that I ever did, right? And it was all property of the bank or the hedge fund. And I get to keep none of it. It's languishing in a mailbox somewhere. I will never see it again. And it was never mine. Like, when I interview with the next person, I can't show them that work because it's proprietary, right? So I just
be like some analysis or something, like a market analysis or something.
And my boss said, this is the best analysis of the stock I've seen in a long time. We made millions off of that. But no, I never saw it again. like even for my own personal records, I would love to have seen that. But I went home with nothing. And I think in tech we have this fundamental openness, and which is really great. Like, we do awesome work, and then we get encouraged to go up on stage and share with people. And then and that's fantastic. Like, this doesn't happen in other industries, and we need to take advantage of that. So, like, don't go home nothing. Like, we spend a lot of time working for the companies that pay us, but we should also think about our own futures, because there will be a point in time where, like, we will leave or whatever, and we need to build a career that's independent of the company that we work for. Like, it's very hard to think about yourself ahead of everyone else, because I'm like an obliging person. Like, people have expectations on me. I strive to fill them over my own, to my own sacrifice or cost, and that's very unhealthy when it comes to looking after yourself. And you always need to look after yourself. I mean, so that I would link to Patrick McKenzie's post on this, because he has a much better way of explaining this than I do. Right. What's the other one? So follow the graph is something this is an easy one. So follow the graph is kind of like, okay, you think you know Webpack, you don't know Webpack. You it's like, okay, like, you now tell me what came before Webpack and what made Webpack succeed. Tell me who else worked on Webpack and what they worked on, and what are they working on today. Like, follow the graph, because there's a DAG of like interesting individuals and interesting projects, and it's a small circle, and you can follow them, and it's kind of
so
like,
you're saying follow the social graph of, because I think about this a lot too, is that like when I look at an open source project, the community behind it is almost more important to me than the actual technical.
Yeah.
Because the technical capabilities of a piece of software is a snapshot, right? Whereas the team and the community behind it is like you're saying, where the trend is going. So like let's dig into, I don't know which project you know well, but I'm curious, is there a project where you saw early on the people behind this are going to make this better than where it is right now, and so I want to get behind it, or maybe even better is what technologies are in that state right now, like Rust, Svelte, Babel.
Svelte's in there. I'd say GraphQL is also in there, and I think React is kind of losing it.
React is losing it. Okay, you're saying the community has become. So I'll tell you. I want to get back to that because React, that's controversial, and I love controversy. But early on, I was very excited about TypeScript almost immediately because of what you're saying. Follow the graph, right? And the guy behind TypeScript, Anders Hellsberg, even when I was in 2001, the story was like I interned at Microsoft, so I was a peon and a nothing burger, but I was 2 offices down from Anders Hellsberg, just almost by fate. And people would tell me like, David, do you understand? You're sitting 2 offices down from a legend, and even then he was a legend. He created .NET. He was like he read the Java spec, and out of his mind came .NET like perfectly formed, right? Yeah. And so I knew when he was working on TypeScript that he would understand exactly the right problem and the right approach to it. So that's the first time like I was on TypeScript back in like version 0.7 or something. And I think that was a good investment, right? Because I think a lot of times people worry about, should I learn Webpack because it's the right investment, or is this crap, right? Same with Svelte, same with React, same with all these technologies that we have to make bets on, like not career-ending bets, but significant bets of time and energy. So you're saying React. A lot of we teach React. I still think React is probably the most influential front-end sync technology in the last, probably not decade, right? In terms of how much it's impacted how we think about front-end development. So you're saying that React's days are in the limelight are over. I'm curious how you're coming to that conclusion.
No, React is becoming boring. So this is not a diss. Right. And I think I kind of do you know Fred Wilson?
AVC?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know of him. I don't know him personally, but yeah.
I mean, you'll eventually meet him in New York. Not that I know him. I'm just like, founder network. I assume that you guys all mingle.
Can I put this banner here?
boring, not over.
Okay.
So the assertion I'm making, right? So Fred Wilson loves this. It's kind of like he calls it the deployment framework, which is from Carlota Perez, which models stages of adoption in technologies, right? And it's all S curves. It's all S curves, right? And in the initial stage, you're like early adopters, hobbyists, whatever, and then you cross the chasm, which React has crossed the chasm. Then you get a majority, right? And then you get the stragglers. We're at the straggler bit. And there you kind of cease to innovate. And it's more about stability. It's more about like getting to fit every use case, getting people to transition over. This is a multi-year process. So like we've decided that React is the UI layer for the mass market. So everyone will be migrating over for years, and there will be the most jobs in React for a long time. So it's you made the right decision betting on React as early as you did, and I also made the right decision banking my career. Like all of 2018, I was like all in on React. So React is boring for a good reason, right? Like you want technologies that you depend on and that you scale at an enterprise level to be boring. And it also enables other innovations to be built on top of it. So now I call this the React distros, the age of React distros, which is another blog post that I have.
I like that mental model. So this is distros, you mean like Linux distros, kind of different flavors of React bundled with like create React app versus some other bundle of React tools. Okay, I really like that mental model. So React distros. Okay.
So if people want to follow up on that, they can read the blog post. But I'll give you the gist, which is so first of all, the greatest trick that React ever pulled compared to other frameworks was that they made their APIs small, so that everyone essentially rolled their own React framework, and they gave React the credit, whereas Angular and Ember and the other frameworks, they were more responsible for more of the stack, and therefore it was like a smaller bunch of use cases that people didn't really feel comfortable with, right? Like you could drop in React more easily than you could in Angular or Ember thing. So there are 1,000 different React frameworks, and React gets the credit for all of them, because the React was just like, yeah, fuck it, we're not responsible for any of this.
So
right?
So those frameworks, let's go through those. So you're saying like, okay, we come out as a very lightweight, because this is, I mean, this is I think a very powerful way to think about tools, is that you want tools that create exponential growth because of their simplicity and ability to be applied different places, right? So React.js is a very small tool. And then I remember, I mean, now, do you remember like the Flux wars? There was like Facebook Flux. There was like all these different ways of how.
I wasn't great, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, like so. Is this what you're saying, right? Like people were kind of saying like, how do we deal with state changes? I think Redux kind of won that first war, and then there's, I guess, like MobX, kind of a different thinking of method of thinking about that. So you're saying like the simplicity of the React tool created an ecosystem, and that is what let it kill kind of the more full-featured AngularJS and Ember type packages.
I don't think it's killed. Like every usage of every framework is growing, so I will never say it killed other frameworks. I would just say like it got credit for a lot more. Like I can build a totally different kind of app, but as long as I use React, I can call myself a React developer.
I see. Okay.
And so we're all building completely different apps with different tool chains, but we give React the credit, whereas Ember and Angular and other stuff, they don't get the credit because you have to adopt their whole tool chain. And I think that was a design decision of React, but also shifted the responsibility and the pain and the user freedom to the users rather than the core maintainers. So obviously, like that's beneficial for bootcamps, that's beneficial for React instructors. And that's beneficial for people who really know what they're doing, but it really hurts the beginners, because the beginners have to pull together like 5 different animation libraries and CSS libraries and state management libraries and routing libraries, and it's just like a lot. It's a lot to learn. And so like the value proposition of something like a Vue or a Svelte is that like we'll make these decisions for you. Like a lot more is first party, but like I think marketing wise, it was a genius move for React, that's great. That's exactly what.
Do you think this React is boring? And I agree with you on the Carlota Perez, and even like the I guess like the Thomas Kuhn model of innovation, right? Like at some point the innovation is locked in, and now we're just figuring out how to get it to everybody, and that's a different set of problems than
and then we build it into the browser.
Yeah, and you're right. Like eventually, like React will probably be built into kind of. Do you think if you're because I have 2 ways of thinking about this. If I'm because my own experiences in my own career, I bet very early on Rails, Ruby and Rails, and in the deployment phase is where I made a lot of, I don't want to say like money, but a lot of my career moves being very valuable as Rails was being deployed and people needed experts, right? Yeah. And so if you're advising as someone who's thinking about entering development, do you recommend bet on the boring or bet on the new and innovative?
Ooh. Up to you. So okay, boring because there's a lot of jobs and a lot of money. That's always where the most money is. But then if you like, you will never. So I said this about like WordPress or PHP or whatever, and Rails as well. Like you can never come into Rails and know more than someone who's been with Rails since 15 years ago. You just can't. Like even if you read everything there was to learn on Earth, like you just never the
history, the people, right? Like it's just so much stuff to know, right? Like
so if you make an early bet, you take more risk, you get more potential reward, which is like you jump into something that's maybe 3 years old, you can probably catch up. Like if you read it, if you learn and read at twice the rate of the passage of time, you can probably catch up in 1.5 years or 2 years. I don't know like what the math is, but anyway. So yeah. So I think there's basically there's money to be made in both directions, and it's just more about your risk appetite and also fundamentally about values. So do you know Brian Cantrell? He used to be CTO of Joyent. And like
yes.
Very core to Node. He gave this very awesome talk about values. Like picking technologies is not just like these are not equal decisions of like, do I pick this old thing? Do I pick this new thing? They're just they embody fundamentally different values that you have to feel like you have to figure out whether you agree with or not. And the one that you agree with the most is the one that you should go for. And like screw everything else. like you will be successful if you just resonate in that community. I don't care what like the macro market is, because at the end of the day, like you're not looking to own the whole market. You're just looking to be a single unit of labor in that market. And so I think that's that in terms of like someone coming new on the scene. Like I was just talking with Charity Majors, who is CTO of Honeycomb, and she was like, I bet early on MongoDB, and that MongoDB made my career. And she would never be as prominent if she didn't make that early bet. And I think people have to make those bets, right? You have to like make a call and say like, okay, I think this is something that will have legs, and I can make my name together with it. You don't get a lot of those shots on goal, but when you do, you should go all in on that, and everything else you should be boring.
I do think that there is there's probably like an optimal point where like the early the optimal point of early and boring, where if you kind of cross those graphs where something is proven a little bit, it's proven somewhat, maybe it has a lot of stars on GitHub or something, and like you see like the follower graphs are growing. Like, do you think that kind of, when somebody asks me this question about startups, like, hey, should I join a startup that's like 2 people, or should I join a startup that's like 10 people or like 1,000 people, right? And like there's probably this like ideal point where like it's proven enough, where you know that it's still very early, you can still get a lot of equity, but you know that they have something. What are some of those indicators you see for technologies? Like, is it like GitHub? Is it like do you do some kind of mentions on Hacker News, Scraper, or like I wonder if there's some way to identify technologies that are about to become the next, Rails, React. Mongo is also interesting because it's like it did become big, but it never really became as big as like what a React has done to front end, right? Like it didn't, but it is, I would say Mongo is actually an example of a bet that like it's big enough to make your career on. It doesn't have to replace SQL, right?
Exactly. The moment you stop looking for the best and you just look for good enough, the possible universe of valid choices opens up so much, and your stress just goes down a lot.
Yeah.
And so like good enough means like there's a lot more choices that are good enough, and then identifying the value, the one that you share the same values with, and then growing within that space. I think it's a decent formula for success. So I haven't really worked out my philosophy for betting on tech. I think bet on people. Like I would never count GitHub star trajectory. Like there are people who do that. I think data driven investing lacks conviction. It's just like, I'll do whatever data tells me. And fundamentally, as a technologist, you have to have more faith in your understanding of tech than that, at a more fundamental level. Like, is this a needed abstraction or not? So one of the I'll talk about why I'm spending more time in Svelte than React. React is not providing enough abstraction for me, and I'm finding that Svelte is. Like, for the problem that I have, like, I think over the next 5 years, a lot of people will realize that React solves Facebook's problems, and most people don't have Facebook's problems.
That's pretty good. That is interesting. That do you, so in your mind, like if you're building a new company, you're like all in on Svelte?
So it's no. So this is nuanced, and I'm sorry, there's no clear answer here. So the one thing that React does really well is cross-platform. Like its ultimate future is to be the universal cross-platform language. They sold us on this idea that it's learn once, write everywhere, but actually we're getting write once, run anywhere, which is the thing that nobody wants to say because it failed so many times, right? But React Native is successful. Like it's growing within Facebook. It's hugely adopted in Microsoft. Shopify just adopted it. Like React Native. Like if I were to write a single app that works on mobile, Android, and iOS, I choose React Native every time. So I think the future of React is React Native, including React DOM is going to shift over to React Native Web, which is the Twitter weird thing, where it's like it's kind of roundabout. You go to React Native and then you come back to web. But I think that's the way it has to go, because it's fundamental. That's the right abstraction for it. That it's a single language that is agnostic of the DOM, and like really nobody could care less about fitting to DOM paradigms when your real goal is to articulate like cross-platform components and stuff like that. Whereas if I'm working on a pure web thing, right, I pick Svelte because its fundamental bet on the language is HTML, whereas React fundamentally bets on JS. And I think that's the right like idea, where like you pick the right tool for the job, and like if you want cross-platform, you pick React, and then if you want web, you pick something that has a template that has CSS. Like Rich Harris's joke. Which like really got to me. This really got to me. He was like, a framework should have a way to style things. And I'm sorry, but inline styles is not good enough.
Let me ask you, Shawn, you were at Netlify for several years, and I go back and forth on static sites, right? Because, for example, the full stack website, we recently converted to a static site by basically writing our own crawler that pumps it into S3 behind Cloudflare. Right. But I feel like static sites have almost become like a technical solution to a problem that's been up-leveled to like a religious methodology of how we should build and deploy. And I'm curious, maybe that's a wrong mental model of, is this, because it seems to me like this came out of this desire to, hey, like, you support a WordPress blog, eventually that WordPress blog is going to get hacked and go down and can't handle traffic. So static sites solve that problem. At least that's kind of my memory of the origin of it. What do you think this is? Do you think this is like a blip? Do you think if we had super fast computers, super fast databases that didn't have limitations, static sites would go away again? Or do you think this is a new mental model that does have lasting power? Maybe I'm not even framing it properly, right? Like is it... and we don't have to get too deeply on this, but like, are static sites a technical solution that become a business solution, or vice versa? Do they have solved business problems that enable new mental models of web site management? Yeah.
Wow. So Netlify spotted this kind of early. So Matt Billman, who's the founder of Netlify, wrote this article for Smashing Magazine, and he was like, and it was the most read article on Smashing Magazine, I think for 2016 or 17. You can find out. But it was like why static site generators are the next big thing, and that was the whole thesis in there about how the modern web platform has evolved so much that you can actually do a lot of all this like rendering client side, but then also do static site generation so that you can have the security and the performance benefits that you talked about. It solves the WordPress scaling issue and the security issues, but then it also replaces it with some other issues, like with content updating and previews and generations, like build times, and so it's not a strictly better option. Like it's just another option with different trade-offs. I think the main thing that it really does provide is that it's cheaper, and money speaks for a lot, right? Because like fundamentally you're not running a server, you're syndicating out to a CDN, and that's the theoretical limit for how cheap serving a site could be, right? And then obviously it's faster. It happens to be faster for your end customer because you're serving it directly from a node that's near them. So there's all those benefits. But in terms of like, is it a strictly better solution yet? Not really, right? Because there are trade-offs, which is with regards to build time and with regards to essentially like people are very used to the authentication model of like server-side sessions and cookies, and in order to have true distributed apps built with the Jamstack, built with static site generators, you have to switch to JSON Web Tokens, which have their own security issues, which are kind of just not very well resolved. So I can go into that later. I can go into that if you need to, but I'm just like, we haven't worked out all the kinks yet, and we're still in like the early adopter stage of static sites. That said, like Netlify has a lot of decent clients like Popeyes and Nike and the bunch of other customers. You can go on to netlify.com/customers, I think, whatever the
Wait, it's funny. I think Netlify is an amazing technology, an amazing set of technologies, and makes it super easy. But I often think like, is this something that is I'll show you the first analogy that how me and Nimit became technical partners is that Nimit was much better than me at making sites work in Internet Explorer. So people who don't know, people who are new to the web, Internet Explorer, it used to be like, I'm 90% done with the site, 90% left to go because of Internet Explorer, right? and I was like, Nimit, I'm not going to spend time learning these crazy little CSS tricks in Internet Explorer because one day it'll be gone. And like, why am I going to waste? It's like, why am I going to throw time down a hole? And he was like, look, that's just our job as engineers, is to make it work in the reality of the world that we live in, right? And I feel like static sites, to me, they kind of have a little bit of that resonance of like refiguring out all this model of server side, client side, and refiguring out all the problems that are going to be by reseparating it or by converting to a static site. It's like, it strikes me as like, is this a problem for the long term, or is this a short term optimization? Because we've gotten so crazy with these CMSs that we've driven ourselves crazy with the CMS, and we've swung too far to the other side.
No. The CMS are adapting to serve this serve this
world.
And so no, okay. So first of all, the static site renaissance is a renaissance. This is not a new idea. It's an old idea that is being updated. Basically, we took all the static site generators of old. I have a bunch of talks on this just because it used to be my job. But we took all the static site generators of old, rewrote them in JS because everything is better with JS. But then also they start being dynamic on the front end with no additional work, right? Like we used to in most static site generators, we used to have the static site, which was with some templating language like Mustache or whatever, and then we'll sprinkle JS on top. And people always use the word sprinkle, meaning it's not a lot. But now we want to author our pages and render them, but then also make them dynamic with the same exact model, and that's where you get things like Gatsby coming out. So I think that's here to stay. If that's the question, it's not a flash in the pan, but we just have to work out a lot of the kinks because it's definitely a new paradigm. But like, people want to fundamentally it's this like server and client coupling where like we started with the web as a document platform and we added all this junk behind the web in servers and stuff because we wanted more and more dynamism. And then JavaScript and then JavaScript evolves because so now it's actually a decent language to work with. So we no longer actually need all that server-side rendering anymore to do a lot of it. Like it's just a fundamentally good idea to separate your APIs from your rendering layer. So why not render out that client, send the client over as a progressive web app, for example, and then only interact with APIs, rather than like sort of commingling or co-locating or conflicting the APIs together with the rendering layer on the server side. I think that's like the fundamental idea, but then also like it's so basically in my talks I kind of conflate it as a confluence of 5 trends. There's not only that there's also like just like a lot more other like it's kind of like the rise of the API economy. Like we want to interact with basically first party APIs, which is like APIs that we run and serverless APIs that we write, and then third-party APIs, which is like Firebase and like Stripe and what have you. And these are all like things that are just, like, we're just taking away responsibilities from the back end, and giving more power to people who write products, like the front end developer. But then I started calling, instead of like front end versus back end, which is kind of like an artificial distinction, like I started calling it product versus platform. And I think that's that's actually the job titles that people have these days. You're responsible for building product, or you build the proprietary platform. And I think people who are responsible for product are responsible for building the front end clients, which are the, like, for example, it could be the static site generated site that hydrates into a progressive web app, or it could be that server side rendered app. But you're like just responsible for that full thing, end to end, and you integrate all the other APIs that you're working with. So like there's all these trends that come in that I think make for this to be a viable tech choice.
Investment
it's not strictly superior yet.
Hey, Shawn, I do want to be respectful of your time, and we're getting a lot of people who are interested in this kind of in your new book, Cracking the Coding Career. So congrats on deciding to write a book for one thing. I think that's awesome. I'd love to get probably like the big questions that we get a lot, and I'm curious, how maybe if you can give us a preview of your thoughts on this. One is what separates a junior versus a senior developer in your mind, and what are the paths that people take? Like, for example, people think, if a full stack developer is kind of the stem cell of the industry, what are the things that you can manifest yourself into, right? Everything from product, project, design, and how should people think about those manifestations? So I'd like to hear your thoughts. Like, I think clearly in my mind, you are manifesting yourself in the industry as a very as an expert, right? But I'm curious, like, how do you think people should think about, hey, I've just graduated from a boot camp, or I've just come out of computer science. How do I get that job as a senior engineer in the industry?
Right. Yeah. So you're jumping a bunch of steps there, right? Because like you finish as a bootcamp grad or as a CS grad, you finish the learn to code section. Then you need to get the first job. And you need to excel as a junior engineer. Then you need to start being able to sell yourself from junior to senior, and then you need to work well as a senior, right? So I broke it down to 5 stages. But let's talk about the senior versus junior divide. So I think that's most interesting.
I think getting into the industry, you're right, is its first challenge, because like you're in the industry now. How do I think about my first like 4 or 5 years of being an engineer?
Yeah. So I think the junior to senior path, like I've been serving some people on this, right? And it's really about like judgment. Like, when can people trust you to carry the distance? So I compiled this list of engineering career ladders. So I think the blog post is literally called every public engineering career ladder. I'm gonna post it in here.
Okay.
So if you can really tell like how people view their progression from junior to senior, and obviously different companies will have different points of view, but then it's always about like ownership. Like, can you own a project from beginning to end? How much adult supervision do you need? How much business impact can you have? Like, is your code something that we can trust you to build production quality code that others can maintain? So stuff like that. I think also one thing I started noting a lot is that junior engineers mostly say yes, and then senior engineers say no a lot. And it's your job. So as junior engineers, you kind of like, your job is to learn, right? Your job is to like pick up as much as possible and just be really super eager to like embrace the learning opportunities that people give you. Whereas senior engineers, your judgment is part of your trade, and being able to push back on people on the stuff that you do and saying like, this is not the right way to think about this. Like, we need more time on this just because it's not going to work. Whatever. You say no a lot more, and that actually works out better for the company in the long run. And that's a hard skill to learn, and that's some judgment that you just have over time. And I think a senior engineer would also be able to basically have more in their head that they can possibly do. which means that they can responsibly take charge of a few junior engineers and give them stuff and supervise them. You know what I mean? Like they're already like jumping ahead and architecting stuff, and then and they can guide junior engineers, and junior engineers can go do that stuff. They can come back with it, and you can actually evaluate their work and work with them. And then,
the second point you brought, saying no. The second point you brought up, saying no, I think about that a lot, because I feel like one thing in my experience working with junior engineers is that it reminds me of, and I'm not a huge fan of Twilight. My wife is, though, but it reminds me of this phenomenon in Twilight where the vampires who are recently turned into new vampires, they call them young bloods because they really are like passionate about sucking blood. And I found out with junior engineers, like they're really passionate about solving problems and almost like to create big solutions because like they're so excited about the engineering aspect of it. And I feel like as a senior engineer, one of my responsibilities was to manage almost like the politics of like what is right for the business from my judgment. How do you think, like, because it's a very subtle thing, right? The saying no is kind of maybe the tactic, but the strategy is more like helping the organization feeling like you're helping them navigate true business solutions, maybe. So I'm curious, like, is there, like, how does someone who's starting out think about, look, I'm junior, they just hired me out of full stack, I'm not going to say no to the CTO, right? How do I make the CTO feel like I'm here to create solutions for the business? Or maybe you have a different mental model. What?
Don't worry about it.
Sorry to interrupt you guys. I need to. I'll let you finish. This is actually a super interesting topic, but I need to jump off. Shawn, stay safe. I know that there's a couple of cool things still to talk about, so we'll let you guys continue. Thank you all.
Awesome. Thanks, Emmett.
See ya. Oh, nice transition over there. Yeah. So, well, I mean, where do I begin? Like, yeah, I've been making the case in the book that like there's a lot of business judgment involved. Like, you need to be able to translate technical business needs to technical reality and say, and like put your hand up if it's not possible, or just like give estimates so that people can make plans on your work. So like stuff like that. Like, but I would never tell a junior engineer to start worrying about that. Like, you're not there yet. You know what I mean? So I just wouldn't worry about that. Like, you want to prove yourself as a junior engineer first. Prove yourself to be an asset to your team, to be capable of doing more, and then start worrying about selling yourself as a senior engineer. And then selling yourself as a senior engineer is a totally different thing from being a senior engineer. And I think that's where you start saying no a lot. You don't apply to a company and say, like, I'm going to say a no a lot to you. Is that okay?
Yeah. Like, okay, we'll find someone. We'll find a new young blood, right? Who can. And one of the chapters that you, and something I think about for myself too, is like, how do I improve this? Is marketing yourself. I think I'd love to kind of your thoughts on what are the, maybe like, what is your advice of like, look, if someone says, I get the idea, Shawn, tell me what are the things I need to be doing right now? Like, what are the tactics here that I need to be doing? Is it like I need to be, I need to have a cool domain like Swix.io. I need to, what are the tactics that make someone good at marketing themselves?
Right. So yeah. I recently wrote a blog post about this. I feel like I say that too much here.
No, that's great. That's great. We'll link to your blog, and it's like.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the word that you use, tactic, is correct. We're not in this job to be marketers, right? Like it's just like a side thing. And I think we should respect that. A lot of marketing advice is like basically takes over your life. And like that's not the case for most people. So I wanted to give advice from basically like the full title was Marketing Yourself Without Being a Celebrity. And I feel like a lot of people are like, I'm not, a celebrity. I don't want to be a celebrity. I just want to market myself competently, and like not miss out on like, I'm a good engineer. I should convey that, and no more, because I don't want to deal with the mobs and stuff like that. And I think that's a perfectly valid solution. So I wrote this blog post partially as like marketing for my book, but then also it was high risk because like if the blog post failed, then like I like lost credibility of marketing. Fortunately, it succeeded.
Okay.
But like, but so basically the whole idea was like, okay, you like collect your assets. So I have this like image in the blog post which I kind of sums up the thesis. It's like you collect your assets, what you have that like is going for you, right? Like your personal brand, your domain, your business value, and your tech skills, and then you apply that in different situations. So you market yourself in public and you market yourself at work, and then those are that's the high level like 5 components of breaking down of how you should market yourself. So yeah, we talk about domains. Like you should have a domain. You should have something like yourname.com or whatever. I don't care, right? Like just have a consistent thing and put all your best work on that. Because like that is way better than a CV. Like I reviewed some for hiring, like I reviewed some CVs and like they're so lifeless. They don't really tell you stuff. Like I don't care about CVs, but like obviously people need CVs, but like your domain is your chance to tell your story your way and to put emphasis and let people like see your work in the way that you want it. So why would you not, like, especially as the developer, you can do this for basically nothing.
Well, no, I think the CV. I mean, I review a lot of resumes, and I'm like, resumes make sense. Resumes to me are like a classified ad in the back of a newspaper in like 1910, right? And like we live in the age of like multimedia. I mean, you know, it's like the bits are so cheap now. We screen share instead of like screen share using the CRDT. We're screen sharing like by sending the actual pixels over each other, right? And so, I'm like the fact that you're using such a low band. I'm like, if I was gonna write a resume right now, I'd be like, go to davidyang.com, right? That'd be the only thing on my resume. So I agree. I feel like the CV it's so lifeless. I don't even know why most CVs don't even have a picture of you on them. I'm like, what does this person look like? I mean, I know there's reasons why people recommend not having a picture, but still, I think it's so lifeless compared to like, show me your YouTube channel, show me your Twitter profile, right? Show me like what makes you is so much more powerful than a resume. So I definitely agree. Like a domain is, I'll do like have a domain. It's cheap and it looks really much more professional than like sending someone to your LinkedIn profile or something.
Right. So, but then I also mean domain by the other meaning of domain. Like you should have a thing that you own and you claim as your territory. And then you are the go-to person on that territory. So you plant your flag on that domain, which means that you give up freedom. You're no longer like all things all people. You are the expert in whatever. So for me, I was the React and TypeScript guy for a year, and that really helped people place me in a box. But then it helps opportunities flow to me. Because I declare myself to be that guy, like to be a specialist in that area. So I would say like what you give up in freedom, you gain 10x in marketing.
So I guess my marketing was to be like you position yourself well, right? You pick a like I'll say a niche, but like the React and TypeScript niche is pretty large, right? It's pretty. I'm curious, like how did you? Is what?
I call it a domain. I don't use the word niche.
Yeah. So that's a pretty large domain. I'm curious how, and I kind of know from behind the scenes from watching you, like, but tell me, like, what are the things that you did that made you valid as owning that domain, right? Like, for example, like the Reddit, you own the Reddit, all the cheat sheets. I'm curious, like anything else that, like maybe how did you come to own that domain?
Slowly. So I think people want like overnight success, but it's not credible, right? Like you're not going to go from zero to expert in overnight. And I think so I kind of preach this as open source knowledge, which means that you show your work and you show where you're at every point in time. And when you're not there yet, you're not there yet, fine. But you keep growing it. And when you're an expert, you have the goods to back it up by just a consistent work history in public. And so React, the React cheat sheets were React and TypeScript cheat sheets were a source of my open source knowledge, which is like, here's everything I know. Please add to it if anything's wrong. Which like the TypeScript core team has PR'd in stuff to fix it for me, which is great. Like I've been taught TypeScript by people at Airbnb and God knows where else, like Microsoft and PayPal. And it's just like this is stuff
you were a moderator on the TypeScript. Is you moderator on TypeScript subreddit or React subreddit?
So yeah, that one is not so. It's not really meritocratic. Like Dan Abramov just gave it to me. And obviously I put in the work for 2 years. I recently gave that up, by the way, just because I wanted to spend my time on other things. But yeah, that's just more like community moderation. growing by answering other people's questions is a really good way to grow, because you start answering questions that you never thought to ask, and just like a really just solid exposure to everything. So I mean, I highly recommend it. But like in terms of owning the domain, I think I did a much more intentional job of React and TypeScript, because like people can see you slowly grow and contribute to your work, and you can grow community around that. And as long as you solve it well, then people come to you with more problems, and then it's just an infinite loop of like more problem solving, and eventually you find that you are the go-to person on that. Like now the official TypeScript docs link to me, as like, hey, if you want to use TypeScript with React, just go here.
That's amazing. That's incredible. All right, Shawn, I don't want to reveal too much from your next book. I think when I know you're now writing in public, so I'm sure you're revealing kind of parts of it. Have you back on when, or I'd love to have another conversation when you're finished with the book, because I'll tell you something. It's like I always look for. I'm always like, when I see something where like I wish this thing existed so I could give it to our students, and this book that you're working on really fits into that category. So excited that you're working on it, and I think exactly the right person to be doing it. So so thanks for that. I'm super pumped, and thanks for coming and talking with Nimit and myself. It's been super enjoyable, and yeah, we'll hope to have you back on again soon, shortly.
Yeah, I'd love to come back. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, thanks so much, Shawn.
Yay.
I'm end the